Good afternoon and welcome to the Net Zero Technology Centre here in Aberdeen with our live TechX Insights webinar. My name is Edward.
And I'm Grace.
And thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this session. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we are going to do a bit of a deep dive into our TechX Accelerator program, a flagship program from the Net Zero Technology Centre, all about how we try and accelerate energy startups and support you. And today we're deep diving into eligibility. Am I eligible? Not only are you eligible to apply, but should you apply for the program? So Grace and I are going to take you through a little bit further. So let's get started straight away with just a bit of a heads up around what actually is involved in the TechX Accelerator program and what it looks like. So if you haven't already had a nosy on our website to find out more about the program, just in a nutshell, the TechX Accelerator is a hybrid program, which means it runs from March to June every year, and it is open for various different sessions, but it has 3 weeks in person as part of the program. We are on the hunt right now. We're looking for 10 to 12 startups from across the UK or Europe or the world who are looking to decarbonize the energy sector. We're looking for technologies in TRL 3 to 6, which we'll tell you more about. And we have amazing grant funding up for grabs if you take part in the program, which has £50,000 per startup. If you get a place on the program, you will get access to 14 weeks of e-learning, workshops, mentoring, in-person sessions, and we are on the hunt for startups that can create a positive carbon impact. So hopefully by this point, you have a little bit of an understanding of what is involved in the TechX Accelerator. Maybe you came to one of our previous webinars where we spoke to you about what the program involves. If you haven't watched that one, have a look at our website and you'll be able to watch the recording back. But let's dive into some of the practicalities of, can you apply? Maybe you think, sounds like a great program, sounds like great funding, but actually, are we a good fit to apply to this program? So we're going to talk you through 12 different things. It seems like quite a lot, but 12 different things that you might want to think about to make sure you consider before you apply to TechX. So consideration number one, do you have a novel technology innovation? So we often get applications from startups that are maybe a service company, maybe a consultancy, maybe they, have bought something online and have adapted it. That might not count as a novel technology innovation. We're really looking for that inventive step. You've tried something differently. You've got a new innovation. So that's what we're really looking for. Something that could be possibly patented, something that is a new system, a new design. If you don't have anything that's particularly unique, sadly, I don't think this is the right fit for you. So one of the big checks we will do, one of the big criteria is technology innovation. So make sure there is something novel in the way that you're approaching the technology. So that's criteria number one. Hopefully a relatively easy one that you can try and tick off. Criteria number two, does your technology focus on industrial applications? So in this net zero space, we see lots of really interesting technologies, everything from electric vehicles to heat pumps for homes. But sadly, at the Net Zero Technology Centre, we are focused absolutely on decarbonising the energy sector. So while those technologies for domestic or commercial applications are nice and have a place, that's not where we are focusing on supporting. So if it's a consumer or a domestic solution, it probably doesn't fit. So if your solar panel technology, if your wind turbine technology, if your target customer is selling to households, it probably doesn't fit. We are really looking at business to business, national grid scale, industrial energy, carbon capture plants, kind of bigger, complicated technologies are what we are particularly looking for. So does it have an industrial application is question number two to really think about. Question number three, does your technology align with our focus areas? Now, you've probably hopefully already had a look at this already, but we have lots of different subcategories of detail that we're looking for. Now, maybe your technology might span across a couple of those different technology focus areas. If that's the case, you need to pick one that you're going to be housed in, and that's going to be your focus. So let's have a quick look at lots of the different ones. The broad four categories that we've got that you need to fit into are either renewables and grid, low carbon hydrogen and alternative fuels, industrial decarbonisation, or carbon capture and storage. So those are the four. We do have digital as a theme across all of those. So if you're a digital solution, then you would fit into all of those. What I will say about the digital solutions, while we are absolutely open to digital solutions, the program is very much focused on those hard engineering challenges that come in the energy sector. So Often the digital solutions we see get accepted are possibly ones where there is likely a physical interface. Maybe it's a control system for a physical technology. Maybe it's an AI tool that can enhance a physical energy production technology, or maybe it's an enabling technology that would help us, deploy more wind or have more efficient carbon capture often, or it could be things like sensors and robotics where there is a bit of physical technology to it. So if you have questions about that, then get in touch. But digital does touch across all the areas, and you can get all these details on our website. But just to give you a sense of the vast number of technology areas you could fit into, thankfully there is plenty of different aspects. So you might have to pay attention here. But in carbon capture, utilization, and storage, the three subcategories we've broadly got here is around capture. So how do we get more greenhouse gases out of the air? That could be direct air capture, could be ocean capture, could be point source capture. But we're also interested in moving and storing. So once we've captured those greenhouse gases, what can we do with them? How do we move them about? And that's where digital comes in there in terms of how do we manage that system overall. And then a little bit around utilization as well, we might be open to. So that could be in things like mineralization or synthetic fuels, possibly even building materials. So how do we take that captured carbon and do something with it? The second category is renewables and grid. This is typically our most popular category that we have. So in generation, this is about power technology. So that could be in offshore and onshore wind. It could be wave and tidal. It could be solar. And it also is things like offshore and onshore geothermal as well. So that could be utilizing existing wells or looking at extracting even minerals and metals. Things like that also would be of interest to us in that category. We're also looking at the infrastructure as well. So the move aspect, so that's transmission lines, and that's also the digital systems. How do we manage the infrastructure around electricity generation? And of course, storage. So that is energy storage, batteries, mechanical storage, thermal storage is also in that space too. The other category number 3, is around hydrogen and alternative fuels. So again, very similar. We've got production, so how do we make those low carbon hydrogen or the alternative fuels? We've also got move and store, so the infrastructure around that, including digital, and we've got the utilization. So how do we use those to replace fossil fuels, whether that's possibly fuel cells or turbines or heat and power systems as well. And the fourth category, that wasn't enough to whet your appetite to apply. We've also got industrial decarbonisation. So this is how we look at, maybe it's cement, maybe it's oil and gas, maybe it is food and drink production, maybe it's chemicals, the big industrial processes where there is still a carbon impact to them. How can we manage those emissions? So actually recognize where these industries are producing emissions, monitor and manage them. How do we remove as much emissions as we can? So that could be venting and flaring. It could be things like big, heavy industry decarbonisation. It could be, again, the digital systems to kind of manage what emissions are being released. And then also looking at fossil fuel alternatives in industrial decarbonisation. So that could be heating and cooling, decarbonised industrial heat, even use of waste heat, use of solar thermal, and even now things like small and modular reactor technologies as well. So a huge variety. So your technology needs to fit at least one of these different areas to try and align and make sure it is viable to join on the program. So have a deep dive into one of those and make sure that you are aligned with those. What are some other areas that we might be looking for?
Yes, so on to number 4, TRL. So is your technology readiness level between 3 and 6? So it needs to be beyond a concept, but earlier than full industrial and system testing. So there are 4 TRL levels that you can fit into. 3, you might be at proof of concept level. 4, you're validated in a lab. Number 5, your prototype has been validated in the relevant environment. Or number 6, your prototype has been demonstrated in a relevant environment. So any of those TRLs, we don't mind, if we have half the cohort are TRL 3, half the cohort are TRL 6, or that might be quite different companies, but any of those TRLs and you will be ready to go for TechX. On to number 5. So can your technology contribute to achieving net zero? So as Edward mentioned, we are the Net Zero Technology Centre, so we're all about net zero. So does your technology help produce greenhouse gases? Can it replace high emitting processes? Or can it produce green power? So any of those, we are all about it.
Absolutely.
And number 6 is the technology pre-commercial. So not revenue generating, as we mentioned with those TRLs. You can't be at commercial level, so that would be past TRL 6, neither is TRL 8 and 9. You don't need to be a company to apply. So we are a bit lenient on that, but as long as you are registered before that due diligence that comes before the start of the program, which would be about March time of next year. So not super strict on being registered just yet.
A few more, so that's 6 of our 12. The next one, number 7, is do you have ambition to deploy in the UK? The Net Zero Technology Centre and our TechX programme is part funded by the UK and Scottish government. So we have an obligation and a desire to try and help our economy here, to try and get more technologies deployed, not just in the northeast of Scotland, but across the UK, as well as we're also sponsored by international partners too. So if you are applying and maybe you're an international company, you're based in Europe, for example, that's absolutely fine. There's a place for you here, but you will have to then create a UK entity, as Grace says, and you will need to try and make sure you are demonstrating how you're going to benefit the UK. Are you going to create jobs here? Are you going to deploy the technology here? Are you going to be raising investment or setting up a branch office? For those of you who are UK based, hopefully that's a relatively straightforward one, to be looking at where your headquarters is based and trying to create impact here as well. 8 is that all the IP for your technology is owned by the startup. So when we ask you to apply to the program, we want to know what is that innovation, what is that novel thing that you have. And often for university spinouts, it's very common that the process works that the university holds the license to some of the IP you might have developed, and the new company entity possibly has to either license that from the university or eventually it gets transferred out. One of the challenges we often have is that in order for us to put our money into the new company, we also need to know that that company has access to all of the intellectual property that is relied upon to make the invention work, to make it commercial. So if you are still very early in the process, you maybe haven't actually agreed the license with the university, or possibly your technology came up as part of a consortium with other partners and you haven't negotiated who is taking over a patent or things like that, that could be quite complicated and it might be difficult for you to get started on the program. So you do need to know that actually the company that is applying to the accelerator has a clear plan for all of its IP. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything is finalized. Often we still see universities still owning the IP and licensing it to the startup, or they're still in that spinning out process. Broadly, that's fine, but there needs to be clarity that there's a company that exists and there's a very clear chance that it's going to have all of the IP it needs, because otherwise it's just any old company, and that's no use for us to know that they don't have the technology. The next one to check, hopefully most of these you're ticking the boxes if you're thinking of applying, but at 9th one is quite a complicated one, but is that you are actually eligible for the funding. So the TechX £50,000 of funding that each startup would receive is covered under a subsidy control called minimum financial assistance. So this means that there are rules around how much government funding a company can receive, and you do want to check and make sure that you get this right, but typically that's £315,000 from subsidy control over the course of 3 years. So when you apply, if you are accepted, one of the onboarding steps will be that if you've received any grants or any government funding over the past 3 years, you'll need to provide evidence of what that was, and we need to make sure that you are not exceeding the £50,000 that you receive from the Net Zero Technology Centre would not take you over that £315,000 limit. So if you've received a big £250,000 grant from somewhere else and a £25,000 grant from somewhere else, that might make it difficult for you then, because that extra 50,000 would possibly take you over that limit to be able to receive the funding. So have a look on the Net Zero Technology Centre website. There's a link right at the very bottom called Subsidy Control Information. You can find the details of the specific laws we're talking about there, but it's also some details in our program handbook as well. So make sure that you are actually eligible to receive that funding and you've not had significant amounts of government grant funding prior to applying to TechX. Next one.
Yes, on to our final three. So hopefully you're all still with us. So number 10, do you have multiple founders in your team? So we don't recommend any sole traders to apply for TechX due to it's quite a big workload for one person to take on. We're also aware of, just trying to run your company in the background. And there is that attendance that you'll need to be attending the program sessions. So we don't expect you to be running a company by yourself and also attending all of our sessions over the 3 months. So it's important that you have multiple founders to help support you through the program. And 11, will you be actively able to participate in TechX? So one representative is recommended for all of these sessions, and that we do have the 3 in-person weeks. So those are 3 weeks in Aberdeen of each block, and that's one person to attend all of those sessions, as I mentioned. So we need at least one person to be active in all of our sessions and taking in all the information that we're going to give you. So a part of that, having that team to support you as well.
Definitely. It's that balance. You don't want it all in one person's head. You want at least a few people to be able to balance it all out.
And lastly, have you applied more than 3 times? So no applications from startups who have applied more than 3 times unsuccessfully will be allowed into the program. It's just one of those things, I guess. Just after 3 years, we don't recommend you, maybe try look somewhere else in an accelerator that might be for you. Hopefully you can ask for some feedback and we can tell why we think you're maybe not the best fit. It might be one of these 12 things that you just maybe don't know about. So happy to expand on any of that.
And equally, sadly, for those who have successfully been through the accelerator program, you also can't apply again. We do get that question occasionally. So that is 12 key things for you to think about if you're considering applying, just making sure that you tick all of those boxes. If you have questions, please pop them into the Q&A section as well, because in the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to be answering any questions that you've got. So make sure you do that. But before we do that, that gives you a sense of, can you apply? What are the kind of key restrictions on applying? But a couple of other things to have a quick think about is just whether you should be applying to the TechX Accelerator, because there are lots of programs out there, lots of funding opportunities. And to be honest, actually, it's a lot of work. The TechX program is designed to make your life a little bit challenging. So I guess you have to be mindful, is it right for you to apply? So here are 6 different things that also make you think about in terms of whether you think you should be applying as well. So I think this is me and Michael, right?
Yes.
So the first one is that you're actually open and willing to learn. One of the hardest things in terms of running the program is that we have lots of founders have different experiences, but you're there to learn, you're there to support others. There's always something to be picking up. So while you might have been on lots of other programs as well, TechX isn't just a tick box exercise. You have to be willing to actively participate, and we are going to be expecting to see that your technology is progressing. So if you come in super confident, not willing to really take on board what the mentors are saying, or not really willing to listen to what the curriculum's doing, or you're 100% confident that your technology is on the right path and you don't need any help, then it's probably not the right program for you, because we need you to be willing to learn. You need you to be looking to get support, willing to follow up with all the people we connect you with, willing to dedicate the time to really engage. We often connect you with hundreds of different people on the program, so it takes work to follow up and connect with all of those people. So we want to make sure that you are only applying if you actually are going to participate and get the benefit from it. Equally, you actually have to have a technology in the development stage. So as Grace was talking about with the TRLs, if you're in TRL 1 and 2, you're still really early concept stage. You've not really often built any prototypes or done any modeling or done any early testing. But equally, if you are up to TRL 7, 8, 9, your core design is probably quite well established. There's not much you can do to adapt it. What we are looking for, the sweet spot for TechX, is we want to help you get from that lab stage, early stage prototype to real industrial deployment. What is industry looking for? What is the right product? How should it be designed? How will you manufacture it? And you need to be willing to implement the learning, to change the technology, to pivot if you hear something that actually is a better commercial avenue for your business. So we need you to still be in that R&D stage. So if you think actually we're really solid, we know exactly what our technology is doing, there's not much anyone else could say that could convince us to change things or adapt things, then again, maybe you're a little bit too advanced for the TechX program, because we are expecting your technology to mold as you learn. Another quick one is as we touched upon, that you can actually start that company. So while you don't need the company, as Grace says, to apply to the program, so maybe you are a spin out of university and you've not quite applied yet for your company's house registration, that's okay. But in order to get the funding, we do need to invest into the actual company itself. So you need to be able to set up a bank account by March 2026. You need to have a company registered probably by February, March 2026. You probably need to have your shareholdings agreed with the other co-founders, with any university partners, with any other kind of stakeholders that you're going to be taking shares. So you need to be in a position that by February next year, you would be able to actually start that company and take part in the process.
Yes, and next up, you need to have the ambition to raise equity funding. So do you expect to sell shares in your company? Do you intend to scale the business widely? So we really recommend that you're interested in expanding your business and growing it as big as it can go. It's a big part of the program is we introduce you to investors. We have our fundraising blog all about pitching your company and getting those investments into the company. So we really recommend you have that ambition. Maybe if you want to keep the company small, you don't want to expand, or maybe not for you. But yeah, that ambition to raise equity funding is a big part of TechX. Be ready for intensity. So yeah, as Edward's mentioned, it's quite full on the program. Can you handle the busy deadlines, pressure, acceleration? Again, going back to that sole trader team member thing, it's important that you're maybe not by yourself to handle the pressure of the program and finish off your pitches that you maybe need to get ready within a few days. It is quite tight, so you need to be willing to push yourself against the other startups. This year, for example, we had our pitch competition, so I had to go head to head in a pitch competition, and quite competitive. So be ready to have that competitive streak and intense program experience. And lastly, be comfortable with publicity. So we like to show off our startups, and we like to advertise all about us and see where they're going, how our alumni are doing. So if you want to be in stealth mode and maybe not ready to share your idea with any mentors, investors, or other startups, maybe not for you. So yeah, be definitely open to that publicity.
So there you go. Hopefully that gives you a good sense of why it's a right fit. We don't want to waste your time either. It's a really promising program. There's a lot of benefits to it, but I'm a bit biased to say that. But equally, it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of activity that goes on. So you want to make sure that not only are you eligible, but also it's the right time and the right fit for you. There's lots of accelerator programs out there. There's lots of free startup resources. The benefit of being part of a cohort like this is you get the community, you get that amplification of your network, you really get to dive deep into really technical topics, you get the great access to funding. So there's lots of benefits to it, but hopefully only when it is right for you. So let's have a quick deep dive. We are coming to the end. We've got about 8 minutes left to answer any of your questions. If you do have questions that we don't touch upon today, or you have questions about other parts like how do I apply, or what benefits come with the program, we've had some other webinars as well, so you can find out more from those. But equally, you'll see a button at the bottom of the page now that will take you to our website, and you can download our applicant handbook, which equally goes into lots of detail about how to actually apply, what you're going to be assessed on. It's a video application, so you can have a look and see what you need to include in that 5-minute video. And if you're interested in more of that, we also have another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks where we'll talk in more detail equally about the application process, how to write a good application. And actually, you can see that button is at the bottom of our screen at the moment as well in green. So you should be able to click that and take you to the next webinar as well. So let's dive into some questions. And we have a couple who've come in here. So feel free to pop your questions into the chat, if I can get my mouse over there and working. So hello, Robert. We've got Robert. We've got Roger. Nice to meet you as well. We've got Balaji. Is the grant only from UK government that should not exceed 250k pounds? So again, you'll need to have a look at the subsidy control information that we've got online. It definitely does cover UK government, but will also include other different funding mechanisms. So it could be not necessarily directly from the UK government. So for example, Innovate UK, possibly Scottish Enterprise. So anywhere where you've had government funding, and possibly even some of the European funding schemes, you would typically get a letter, an award notification letter. And in those letters, it will typically say what the funding mechanism is. When we ask you to verify if you're going to meet that funding need, we'll ask for copies of all of those letters, the funding award letters from any grants that you've received. And in the application, we often also ask you any grants that you've received as well. So again, that gives us a head start. So it can't guarantee, because it equally is some government funding where it doesn't count towards this. So it is a bit complicated, and I'm not confessing to be an expert, but look at all those grant award letters, have a look at the subsidy control information on our website, and have a look and maybe get some advice if you need to from your other grant funders just to confirm, does this contribute towards my MFA, minimum financial assistance allowance? And hopefully that will help give you some clarity as well. Another question there, would grants from private entities also be considered in this calculation? Typically no. So again, check with those private entities what the funding mechanism was, because sometimes it's not always clear that they've used government funding for those grants. So again, look for the letters, but in most cases, it isn't counted as towards minimum financial assistance, but you'll just need to check. It does depend on the specific grants you've got there. So thank you for that. Keep your questions coming in. Another question about the ASA template document. Yes, that's a really good point. So we now have the agreements available. So we will send those out. They should be going out later today. So if you're interested in the funding mechanism, it's called an advanced subscription agreement under the £50,000, which would mean under certain thresholds, you're in the future, the £50,000 would convert into a shareholding into your company. So the Net Zero Technology Centre would be a shareholder in your company, and we will be able to send you template versions of those agreements in draft form for you to just have a look and see if you think you'd be able to agree to those terms or not. So we will circulate them. If you haven't asked for that, then drop a message to techx@netzerotc.com. and we'll be able to give you those documents over, but they're ready to go out, so they should be going out this week, I believe. Lovely. Keep those questions coming in. I think we've got a couple more over here. Can you expand on the eligibility rules for spin-outs that have not been incorporated yet? So it's a lovely, complicated one. It does depend on the stage that you're at. In general, eligibility, mostly you're fine. So we do have a lot of spin-outs that come out. So the main issue is those points that we've raised around how far along the spin-out process are you to be able to actively take part. So, for example, the Net Zero Technology Centre through TechX will never give the funding to the university. So you cannot apply under the university as, you know, a sub-department or a spin-out that's still within the university in the same way that you might for maybe other research grants. We have to fund the company that has spun out. So you can still be on that spin out journey. Sometimes it depends on what universities' stages look like, what stage gates you're at. Often there's a couple of years where maybe the research is still being developed internally and there's no company, and that's where you're applying for research grants. At that stage, you're too early for us because you're still really housed within the university. There's sometimes a middle stage where actually the company has been created, the IP is still owned by the university, the researchers are maybe have some contract negotiations, so they're allowed to spend X number of days on the spin out, but they're still employed by the university. So there's this sort of hybrid mode, but actually more and more of the funding is being put into the company entity. That's probably a good stage that TechX could support because the entity is there and you maybe are still finalizing the licensing agreement, but as long as there's a paper trail that can show us university owns the patent or the patent application, we're on this spin out development program. If we hit these milestones, company has been created and IP will be transferred into the company. That typically is enough for us to say, yeah, absolutely great. The company is attached to that IP in some way that we can trust it. The difficulty is you could create a company, call it some name, and then if the university hasn't agreed to that, you know, we've invested in this company, and then the university turns around and goes, that's not the company we want. We need a shareholding. And then you have to create a brand new company. That if it's going to end up like that, too complicated for us. And then the third stage is the company is pretty much fully spun out. There's a license agreement in place. The founders, the researchers are now co-founders. They work in the company part-time, full-time. Again, fully eligible to apply to TechX at that stage. So spin-outs can be a complicated one, but essentially the main criteria is, do we have a vehicle to give you that exact money? And do you have the time equally, because we kind of expect you to be working on the business pretty much full time, or at least one or two founders working on it pretty much full time. So if you're still really early, you're still doing teaching commitments, or you're still full-time research associate, that might be quite difficult for you to take part in the program. Keep any questions coming in. A few more minutes left. We have another one. Do you require a university support letter for evolving spinouts? We don't require it. Sometimes we might. Again, it depends on that stage of the spin-out process. So we have asked for that. So if the university maybe still owns some of the IP, or is in the process of negotiating, or there is a spin-out kind of plan, we might ask for some of that evidence just to prove, but we don't require it. It's not part of the application. So we will ask you in the application, are you a spin-out? Have you got the company, etc. But essentially that is part of the due diligence. Depends on what stage you're at, what documents we might end up asking for. Excellent. A couple of other questions. How long does it take to secure the 50K after the program has started? So I'll take them step by step. So you are giving it in 2 tranches. So the 50K, once you are signed on day 1 of the program, you can put in a request for £25,000 of that. That is enabled to cover your travel to the in-person weeks, to cover any program participation costs, but also to get you kick-started in the technology development process we want you to go in. And the second 25K is able to be submitted once you've completed the full program, you've engaged with everything, you've not disappeared for 2 months. As long as you make to the end and participate actively and don't breach any rules or code of conduct, then you're eligible for the second 25K on the day of graduation in June. So by middle of June 2026, you would have the full 50K in your bank account ready to go. Hopefully that helps. And is there any financial support during the program to complete design related to the system and travel costs to Germany for a few days to test? So yes, you will be able to use the program funding to cover most of those costs. So that first 25K, you can get started with straight away to cover those travel costs. We'll also put you in touch with suppliers during the program who can maybe help with some of that engineering work, or who can help with some of that testing and certification. So hopefully that helps. Thank you, Saeed. We've got another question from Richard, and I think you've got a bit of detail on the technology. So this type of circular economy innovation fall within the industrial decarbonisation scope. I'll need to have a more detailed read of that to be able to properly answer it. So I don't want to do it on the website, on the webinar, sorry. But in most cases, it sounds like it would. It might, it looks like it might have some of the in alternative fuels aspects to it. So, but drop us an email if you want a bit of a clarification, just to make sure, and hopefully read in detail, and hopefully there's a sub bullet point that you'll be able to pick out if there's anything on that. Wonderful. Any further questions? And that Sophie popped the email address into the chat. So hopefully if you need to drop any questions, then feel free to get in touch at any point around that. So I think if there's no more questions for now, really appreciate your time joining the process. Myself and Grace and our colleagues Daniel and Mariah will be around over the next couple of weeks to answer any of your questions. Applications are open now and close on the 5th of January 2026. To apply, you just go to the Net Zero Technology Centre website and click on TechX, and you'll be able to find the application. It is a video application, 5 minutes, talking about your technology, your team, and why you want to be part of the TechX program. And you will be able to complete a really quick start of your application. So you just go on, create your profile, and then you can see all of the questions. We encourage you to try and create your profile as soon as possible, just so that any updates to the application process or any issues with the system, if anything comes up, we know you're interested in applying, you've got an application started, and you can save and come back to your application as you go through it as well. So hopefully that is quite helpful. So thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully that answers should you apply and can you apply. Our next webinar will be in a couple of weeks' time, all about how you apply and how to do a really effective and engaging video application. If there are any other questions, please do get in touch. But good luck with your applications, and we look forward to reviewing them very soon.
Thanks, everyone.